Elena walked through the long white hallways of the Zerion Institute. Her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor as she carried her datapad and a cup of coffee. She was tired. It was her third week studying at the most famous research center in the galaxy, and she still felt out of place. The other students were all aliens. There were tall, thin creatures with 4 arms and blue skin. There were small, furry beings that spoke in high-pitched voices. There were rock-like students who moved slowly and never seemed to sleep. Elena was the only human, and she knew the others thought she was strange. Humans feel too much, she had heard Dr. Zethkri say to another teacher. They see emotions where there are none. It makes them bad scientists. Dr. Zethkri was Elena's advisor. He looked like a giant praying mantis with green skin and large black eyes. He was smart, but he was also cold. He never smiled, though Elena wasn't sure if his species could smile at all. Elena reached the door to Lab Section 7. She pressed her hand on the scanner, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a large room with white walls and bright lights. In the center of the room was a cage made of blue energy. The quantum containment field hummed softly. Inside the cage was the creature. It was huge, bigger than any bear Elena had seen on Earth. It had 6 legs, each ending in sharp claws that looked like they could cut through metal. Its body was covered in dark fur, but what made it truly frightening were the crystal spines that ran along its back. They were clear and sharp, catching the light like broken glass. The other students called it Subject X7. They said it came from a death world called Vorthak Prime, where everything was dangerous and nothing was safe. The creature had been trapped here for 3 years, ever since a research team captured it. Elena sat down at her desk and opened her datapad. She was supposed to record the creature's behavior for her project. Most of the time, it just lay in the corner of its cage, not moving. The other students said it was stupid, just a dumb animal that only knew how to kill. But Elena saw something different. When she looked at the creature, it looked back at her. Not the way an animal looks at things, but the way a person looks at another person. Its eyes were yellow and bright, and they seemed to understand more than they should. "Hello?" Elena said quietly, even though she knew it probably couldn't understand human words. "I'm Elena. I'm going to be watching you for a while." The creature's ears twitched. It raised its massive head and stared at her. For a moment, Elena felt like it was studying her just as much as she was studying it. Dr. Zethkri entered the lab. His 4 legs clicked on the floor as he walked over to Elena's desk. "Miss Vasquez," he said in his strange, clicking voice, "how is your research going?" "It's interesting," Elena replied. "I think the subject shows signs of higher intelligence than we thought." Dr. Zethkri's large black eyes focused on her. "That is exactly what I was afraid of. Humans always think animals are smarter than they are. You see feelings where there are none. You imagine thoughts that do not exist." Elena looked back at the creature in the cage. It was still watching them, and she could swear it understood their conversation. "But look at its eyes," Elena said, "and the way it moves its head when we talk. It's listening to us." "It hears sounds," Dr. Zethkri said firmly. "That does not mean it understands words. Animals on many worlds have good hearing. That does not make them smart." Elena wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't help. The other teachers and students had already decided what the creature was. They saw it as just another dangerous animal from a dangerous world. After Dr. Zethkri left, Elena continued her observations. She watched the creature eat the raw meat they gave it. She watched it pace around its cage. She watched it sleep. But most importantly, she watched its eyes. When other people came into the lab, the creature would back away to the far corner of its cage. It would lower its head and bare its teeth. Its crystal spines would stand up, ready to fire deadly projectiles at anyone who got too close. But when Elena was alone with it, the creature was different. It would come to the front of the cage. It would sit down, almost like a dog waiting for its owner to come home, and it would watch her with those bright yellow eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Days passed. Elena came to the lab every morning and every evening. She brought her lunch and ate it while talking to the creature. She told it about her day, about her classes, about Earth, and what it was like to be the only human at the Institute. The creature never responded with words, of course. But Elena began to notice small things. When she was sad, the creature would make a low, rumbling sound in its chest. When she was happy, its ears would perk up. When she was angry about something Dr. Zethkri had said, the creature's spines would rise slightly as if it shared her frustration. One evening, Elena was working late in the lab. Most of the other students had gone to their rooms. The halls were quiet except for the hum of the containment field. "I think you understand more than they know," Elena said to the creature. "I think you're just as smart as any of us. Maybe smarter." The creature tilted its massive head and made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Elena stood up and walked closer to the cage. She had never done this before. The safety rules said to stay at least 3 meters away from the containment field. "What's your real name?" Elena asked softly. "I know it's not Subject X7. That's just what they call you because they don't want to think of you as a person." The creature rose to its feet. It was even bigger standing up, probably 3 meters tall at the shoulders. It walked slowly to the edge of the cage, right up to the energy field. Elena was now less than a meter away from one of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. If the containment field failed, the creature could kill her in seconds, but she wasn't afraid. The creature sat down and looked at Elena. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Elena felt like she was looking into the eyes of someone who had been waiting a very long time for someone to really see them. "I'm going to call you Kronos," Elena said, "after an old Earth legend. Is that okay?" The creature made that soft purring sound again. Elena smiled. For the first time since coming to the Institute, she felt like she had made a friend. She didn't know that someone was watching them on the security cameras. She didn't know that her conversations with the creature had been recorded. And she didn't know that some of the teachers were starting to think that maybe the human student was becoming too attached to a dangerous animal. But Kronos knew. He could smell the fear and anger of the watching creatures. He could sense the danger that was coming for the small human who had shown him kindness. And deep in his chest, something that had been sleeping for 3 long years began to wake up. Elena started coming to the lab after hours. The Institute was quiet at night, with only a few security guards walking the halls. She would slip into Lab Section 7 with her keycard and spend hours with Kronos. She brought books and read to him. She showed him pictures on her datapad of Earth, of forests and oceans and cities full of humans. Kronos would listen, his yellow eyes following her movements as she talked. "This is where I grew up," Elena said one night, showing him a picture of a small house surrounded by trees. "My family has a farm. We grow food and take care of animals. Real animals, not prisoners." Kronos made a low rumbling sound. Elena had learned that this meant he was interested or happy about something. "I think you would like it there," Elena continued. "There's lots of space to run, no cages, no tests." As the weeks passed, Elena began to notice things that troubled her. During the day, she would see technicians wheeling equipment into the lab. They would set up machines around Kronos's cage and run tests on him while he was unconscious. Elena asked Dr. Zethkri about the tests. "We are studying his brain structure," the mantis-like creature explained. "The neural patterns of creatures from death worlds are very interesting. We want to understand how they process fear and aggression." "But some of those machines look like they hurt him," Elena said. "I've seen the marks on his fur where you attach the electrodes." Dr. Zethkri's black eyes stared at her. "Science requires sacrifice, Miss Vasquez. One creature's temporary discomfort helps us understand all creatures like him." Elena didn't like this answer, but she knew she couldn't do anything about it. She was just a student and not even an important one. That night she went to see Kronos as usual. But something was different. The creature was lying in the corner of his cage, and he didn't get up when she entered the lab. His breathing was heavy, and she could see small wounds on his head where the testing equipment had been attached. "Kronos," Elena called softly. "Are you okay?" The creature lifted his head slowly. His yellow eyes looked dull and tired. When he tried to stand up, his legs shook. Elena felt angry. She had seen enough animals on her family's farm to know when one was in pain. Whatever they had done to Kronos today had hurt him badly. She started keeping detailed notes about Kronos's behavior. She recorded how he reacted to different sounds and situations. She documented how he used his claws to draw patterns in the dirt of his cage, patterns that looked almost like writing. She filmed him using a piece of metal from his food dish to reach things outside his cage. Most importantly, she recorded how he communicated with her. Kronos had learned to understand many human words. When Elena said food, he would look at his feeding area. When she said sleep, he would lie down. When she said pain, his ears would flatten and he would make a sad whining sound. Elena spent 2 weeks preparing a presentation for the Institute's Research Council. She gathered all her evidence that Kronos was not just an animal, but an intelligent being who deserved better treatment. The day of her presentation, Elena stood in front of 12 alien researchers. Dr. Zethkri was there, along with Dr. Vextar, a crystalline creature who was the head of the research council. There were also representatives from 6 other species, all watching Elena with curious or skeptical eyes. Honored researchers, Elena began. I have spent 2 months studying Subject X7, and I believe we have made a serious mistake. She showed them her videos of Kronos using tools. She played recordings of how he responded to human speech. She showed them the patterns he drew in the dirt, patterns that were too complex and organized to be random. This creature is not just an animal, Elena said firmly. He shows clear signs of intelligence, emotional complexity, and communication ability. He is a person, not a test subject. When Elena finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Dr. Vextar spoke. Her voice sounded like crystal bells ringing. Miss Vasquez, she said, you have done exactly what we expected a human to do. You have let your emotions cloud your judgment. But the evidence, Elena started, the evidence shows an animal that has learned simple responses to stimuli. Dr. Zethkri interrupted. Humans are well known for projecting consciousness onto creatures that do not possess it. On your own planet, you form emotional attachments to pets and claim they understand you. Another researcher, a being that looked like a walking tree, nodded his branches. Humans see intelligence where there is only instinct. This is why your species is considered primitive by galactic standards. Elena felt her face turn red with anger. Primitive? We're primitive because we care about other living things. You are primitive because you cannot think clearly, Dr. Vextar said coldly. Your emotional responses interfere with proper scientific observation. The council voted to continue the experiments on Kronos. In fact, they decided to increase them. Dr. Vextar explained that Elena's attachment to the subject had compromised her objectivity, and they needed to gather more data before any other students became similarly affected. Elena left the meeting feeling defeated and angry. She went straight to Lab Section 7 to see Kronos. The creature was pacing in his cage, agitated. When Elena entered, he came immediately to the front of the containment field. His spines were slightly raised and his ears were flat against his head. They don't believe me, Elena told him sadly. They think I'm just a foolish human who doesn't know the difference between intelligence and instinct. Kronos made a sound Elena had never heard before. It was low and angry, almost like a growl, but more complex. He looked directly at the security camera in the corner of the lab, then back at Elena. For the first time, Elena realized that Kronos knew about the cameras. He knew they were being watched. And from the look in his eyes, she suspected he understood much more about his situation than anyone realized. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Dr. Vextar had said about increased experiments. She had seen what the current tests did to Kronos. If they made them worse, they might seriously hurt him. She made a decision that would change everything. Elena got out of bed and quietly made her way through the institute's halls. She had studied the facility's computer systems as part of her coursework. She knew how the security worked, and she knew where the main power controls were located. If the other students and teachers wouldn't listen to reason, maybe it was time for them to see what Kronos was really capable of. Elena reached the power control room and used her student access code to enter. The room was full of blinking lights and humming machinery. She found the controls for Lab Section 7 and began to carefully adjust the power settings. She wasn't trying to free Kronos immediately. She was just weakening the containment field enough that it might fail if he really tried to break it. Whether he did or not would be his choice. As Elena worked, she thought about her family's farm back on Earth. Her father had always taught her that intelligent creatures should never be kept in cages against their will. Freedom is the right of any thinking being, he used to say. Elena finished her work and quietly returned to her room. Tomorrow, Kronos would face another day of painful experiments, unless he chose to do something about it. The alarm started screaming at 3 a.m. Elena woke up in her small dormitory room as red emergency lights flashed through her window. The sound was loud and harsh, the kind of alarm that meant serious danger. She could hear running footsteps in the hallway outside and voices shouting in different alien languages. She already knew what had happened. Elena quickly put on her clothes and ran toward Lab Section 7. The hallways were full of security guards and panicked students. Some of the guards were carrying energy weapons that glowed with blue light. Others had nets and restraining devices. "All students return to your rooms immediately," announced a voice over the communication system. "We have a containment breach in Lab Section 7. The facility is on lockdown." Elena pushed through the crowd, trying to reach the lab. A security guard tried to stop her, but she showed him her student identification. "I study in that section," she said. "I need to make sure my research is safe." The guard, a large creature with thick gray skin, looked at her suspiciously, but let her pass. When Elena reached Lab Section 7, she saw the damage. The door was twisted and bent, hanging off its supports. Inside the lab, equipment was scattered everywhere. Computers were smashed, tables were overturned, and there were deep claw marks in the metal walls. The containment field was completely destroyed. Where Kronos' cage used to be, there was now just an empty space surrounded by broken machinery. Dr. Zethkri was standing in the middle of the destroyed lab, talking rapidly into a communication device. When he saw Elena, his black eyes focused on her with suspicion. "Miss Vasquez," he said.
"How convenient that you are here so quickly." "I heard the alarms," Elena replied, trying to look shocked at the destruction.
"What happened?" "Your subject broke free," Dr. Zethkri said. His voice was cold and angry. "The containment field failed during the night. The creature destroyed everything and escaped." Elena looked around the lab. "Where did it go?" Before Dr. Zethkri could answer, another alarm started sounding. This one was different, more urgent than the first. "Security breach in Student Housing Block C," announced the voice over the communication system. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Student Housing Block C was where Elena lived. Dr. Zethkri stared at Elena. "The creature went to your dormitory, Miss Vasquez. It seems to know exactly where you live." Elena felt her heart racing. She ran toward the student housing area, ignoring Dr. Zethkri's shouts for her to stop. When she reached her dormitory building, she found it surrounded by security guards. Their weapons were pointed at the entrance, and everyone looked nervous and afraid. Commander Thexmol was in charge of the security forces. He was a Korthak warrior, tall and muscular with thick armor and sharp teeth. He was known throughout the Institute as someone who solved problems with violence first and questions later. "Where is the creature?" Elena asked one of the guards. "Inside," the guard replied nervously. "It broke through the main entrance and went straight to the 3rd floor. It's positioned outside one of the student rooms and won't move." Elena realized with shock that Kronos had gone to her room. Somehow he had found her living quarters in a building he had never seen before. "We're going in," Commander Thexmol announced to his soldiers. "The creature is too dangerous to leave alive. We'll use maximum force." "Wait," Elena said quickly. "Let me talk to him." Commander Thexmol laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Talk to it? It's an animal, human. A dangerous predator that belongs in a cage or dead." "He's not just an animal," Elena insisted. "He came here looking for me. He's not attacking anyone. Maybe he just wants help. The only help that creature needs is to be put out of its misery," Commander Thexmol said. He raised his weapon, a large gun that fired explosive energy blasts. Elena made a desperate decision. Before anyone could stop her, she ran toward the dormitory entrance. "Elena, no!" Dr. Zethkri shouted from behind her. She ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty except for broken furniture and claw marks on the walls. At the end of the corridor, she could see a massive dark shape lying in front of her door. Kronos. The creature was bigger than Elena remembered, filling most of the narrow hallway with his bulk. His crystal spines were raised, ready to fire deadly projectiles at anyone who approached. His yellow eyes scanned both ends of the corridor, watching for threats. When he saw Elena, everything changed. Kronos' spines lowered, his ears perked up, and he made that soft rumbling sound Elena had learned meant he was happy. He moved to one side of the hallway, making room for her to reach her door. "Hello, Kronos," Elena said softly. "Are you okay?" "Did they hurt you?" The creature made a low whining sound and gently touched Elena's arm with one massive paw. His claws were carefully retracted so he wouldn't accidentally scratch her. Elena could hear heavy footsteps on the stairs. "The security forces were coming. We need to get out of here," Elena whispered. "They want to kill you." Kronos' ears flattened against his head and his lips pulled back to show his sharp teeth. He understood. The security team reached the 3rd floor. Elena could see their weapons and armor at the end of the hallway. Step away from the creature, human, Commander Thexmal shouted. We're going to destroy it. His name is Kronos, Elena shouted back. And he's not just a creature. He's my friend. Commander Thexmal raised his weapon. Friends don't have claws and acid spit, human. Move away now or you'll be hurt when we fire. Elena stepped closer to Kronos instead of moving away. If you want to hurt him, you'll have to go through me. That's when Kronos showed the security forces why creatures from death worlds were feared throughout the galaxy. The crystal spines along his back fired like missiles. They moved faster than Elena's eyes could follow, striking the walls around the security team and filling the air with sharp fragments. The guards dove for cover as Kronos' acid claws melted through their energy shields like they were made of paper. But most impressive was how smart he fought. Kronos used the narrow hallway to his advantage, making it impossible for the guards to surround him. He grabbed pieces of broken furniture and threw them with perfect accuracy, knocking weapons out of hands and hitting weak spots in armor. And through it all, he was careful never to hurt Elena. When she stumbled during the fight, one of his 6 legs caught her and gently pushed her to safety. When debris fell from the ceiling, he shielded her with his massive body. Elena realized that Kronos wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting her like she was part of his family. This way, Elena shouted, pointing toward the emergency exit at the far end of the hallway. Kronos cleared a path through the security forces, not killing them, but making sure they couldn't follow. Together, Elena and her massive friend escaped into the maze of corridors that made up the Zerion Institute. Behind them, alarms blared, and voices shouted orders in a dozen different languages. The hunt had begun, but Elena wasn't afraid anymore. She had Kronos and Kronos had her. And together, they were going to show the galaxy what real intelligence looked like. Elena and Kronos ran through the dark corridors of the Institute. The building was huge, with hundreds of labs, storage rooms, and research areas. Emergency lights flashed red, and the sound of pursuing footsteps echoed behind them. This way, Elena whispered, leading Kronos toward the research wing. She knew the layout better than the security forces because she had spent weeks exploring the facility for her studies. Kronos followed her closely, his 6 legs moving silently despite his massive size. Elena was amazed at how quietly such a large creature could move when he wanted to. They reached a junction where 3 hallways met. Elena could hear voices coming from 2 different directions. They were being surrounded. Kronos stepped in front of Elena and tilted his head, listening carefully. After a moment, he moved toward the 3rd hallway, the one that led to the biological research section. Elena trusted him and followed. As they moved deeper into the research wing, Elena began to understand something strange. Kronos wasn't running randomly. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, even though he had never been in this part of the building before. How do you know which way to go? Elena whispered. Kronos made a low rumbling sound and touched his nose with one claw. Elena realized he was following a scent trail, something his nose could detect but hers couldn't. They passed several labs filled with strange equipment and alien plants. In one room, Elena saw tanks full of glowing creatures swimming in green liquid. In another, there were cages containing small animals from different worlds. But Kronos led her past all of these toward something specific. They stopped at a heavy metal door marked, "Restricted Access, Level 7 Clearance Only." Elena's student keycard wouldn't work on this door, but Kronos solved that problem by melting the lock with his acid claws. Inside was a room Elena had never seen before. It was much larger than the normal labs, and it was filled with containment units similar to the one that had held Kronos. And they weren't empty. Elena gasped as she saw what was inside the units. There were creatures from dozens of different worlds, all held in quantum containment fields. But these weren't the normal research animals she had seen in other labs. These creatures were all large, all clearly intelligent, and all looking at Elena and Kronos with eyes that held too much understanding. "Oh no," Elena whispered. "They're all like you." Kronos walked slowly through the room, stopping at each containment unit. The creatures inside recognized him somehow. They pressed against their energy barriers and made sounds that Elena realized were attempts at communication. In one unit was a creature that looked like a giant octopus with silver skin and bright blue markings. In another was something that resembled a cross between a wolf and a bird, with feathers instead of fur and 6 intelligent eyes. There was a being made of what looked like living crystal. constantly shifting colors as it watched them pass. Elena found a computer terminal and accessed the files. What she read made her feel sick. Subject X1 through X15, she read aloud, all captured from different worlds, all classified as non-sapient specimens for research purposes. But the notes in the files told a different story. The researchers had documented tool use, complex communication, problem-solving abilities, and emotional responses in all the creatures. They knew these beings were intelligent. They just didn't care. Elena found a video file and played it. Dr. Vextar appeared on the screen, her crystalline form glittering under the lab lights. Research log 447, Dr. Vextar said in her crystal bell voice. The specimens continued to show signs of what primitive species might mistake for intelligence. However, since these creatures have not developed space travel or been accepted into galactic civilization, they remain classified as animals under Galactic Law 15.7. Elena felt angry and disgusted. They're keeping people in cages because they don't have spaceships? She kept reading and found something even worse. There were files about humans. Proposal for Human Research Initiative, one document was titled. Elena opened it with shaking hands. The file talked about humans as an interesting case study in emotional intelligence. It discussed how humans formed bonds with other species and showed empathy in ways that most galactic civilizations had evolved beyond. The human specimen currently studying at our facility shows typical human attachment behaviors, the document said. We recommend capturing additional humans for comparison studies once the current subject has provided sufficient data. Elena realized with horror that she wasn't a student here. She was a test subject. They had brought her to the institute to study how humans interacted with other species. Her friendship with Kronos wasn't an accident. It was part of their experiment. Kronos moved to Elena's side and looked at the computer screen. When he saw the images of humans in the file, his spines raised slightly and he made an angry growling sound. You understand, don't you? Elena said to him. They're not just keeping your people prisoner. They're planning to do the same thing to mine. That's when Elena heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Commander Thexmol's voice echoed through the halls. Search every room, he ordered his soldiers. The human and the creature are somewhere in this section. When you find them, kill the beast and bring me the girl. Dr. Vextar wants to question her personally. Elena quickly copied all the files onto her datapad. This was evidence that could expose what the Institute was really doing, but only if she could get it to the outside world. Kronos moved to the door and listened. Elena could see his muscles tensing as he prepared for another fight. But then something unexpected happened. The creature in the octopus-like being's containment unit began to glow. The light pulsed in a pattern, and Elena realized it was some kind of signal. The other creatures began responding, each in their own way. The wolfbird creature made rhythmic chirping sounds. The crystal being flashed different colors in sequence. Elena stared in amazement. You're all talking to each other. Kronos looked at Elena and made a series of complex sounds, different from anything she had heard from him before. It took her a moment to understand what he was asking. He wanted her to free the others. I don't know how, Elena said. I don't have the codes for their containment systems. Kronos moved to the nearest control panel and began examining it with his claws. Elena watched as he carefully manipulated the controls, not randomly but with clear purpose. You know how these work, Elena said with wonder. You learned by watching them work on your cage. One by one, Kronos began shutting down the containment fields. As each barrier fell, the imprisoned beings stepped out of their cages for the first time in years. They didn't rush toward freedom immediately. Instead, they all gathered around Elena, looking at her with curious and grateful eyes. Elena realized they understood that she had been the one to free Kronos first, and that he had brought her here to help them. The crystal being touched Elena's hand gently with one faceted appendage. The sensation was warm and tingly, and suddenly Elena could hear a voice in her mind. Thank you, small brave one, the voice said. We have waited long for someone to see us as we truly are. Elena gasped. You can talk in minds? Many of us have abilities your kind would find unusual, the voice replied. We have much to teach each other if we can escape this place of cages and lies. Commander Thexmol's voice was getting closer. They're in the restricted section. Seal all exits. Elena looked around at the freed beings. They were all different species from different worlds with different abilities, but they all had one thing in common. They had been treated like animals when they were clearly people. "Can you help us get out of here?" Elena asked. The crystal being's colors shifted to what Elena somehow knew was amusement. "Child, we are beings who survive the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. These soft, civilized creatures who kept us caged, they are about to learn what we are truly capable of when we work together." Elena smiled. For the first time since the alarms had started, she felt like they might actually escape. And more than that, they might be able to expose the truth about what the Institute was really doing to the galaxy. The freed beings moved through the Institute like shadows. Elena had never seen anything like it. Each creature used their natural abilities in ways that made them nearly invisible to the security forces. The octopus-like being could change its color to match any surface, becoming part of the walls themselves. The wolfbird creature moved through air vents that were too small for anyone else, scouting ahead and reporting back through the crystal being's mind speech. Other creatures used abilities Elena couldn't even understand. One seemed to bend light around itself, while another moved so fast it appeared to teleport. But it was Kronos who led them all. The other beings clearly recognized him as their leader, following his silent signals as he guided them toward the Institute's central communication hub. Elena understood the plan without being told. They needed to broadcast the evidence she had gathered to the rest of the galaxy before Dr. Vextar could stop them. They reached the main computer center, a large room filled with servers and communication equipment that connected the Institute to the galactic network. But the room was heavily guarded. Through the crystal being's mind speech, Elena could hear the creatures coordinating their attack. They had developed their own language during their years of imprisonment, a mixture of mental communication, sound patterns, and gestures that let them work together perfectly. The assault began. The wolfbird creature dropped from the ceiling vents, landing silently behind the guards. The octopus being flowed through gaps in the walls that seemed too small for it to fit through. Kronos charged through the main entrance, his crystal spines firing in all directions. But this wasn't random violence. Every move was calculated. The creatures worked together to disable weapons, jam communication devices, and corner the guards without seriously hurting them. Elena realized these beings weren't savage killers despite coming from death worlds. They were warriors who understood the difference between necessary force and cruel violence. Within minutes, the communication center was secure. Elena ran to the main terminal while the creatures stood guard. "I need to upload these files to the galactic network," Elena said as she worked frantically at the computer. "But the security protocols are too complex. I can't break through them fast enough." The crystal being approached the terminal. Its faceted hands touched the computer interface, and suddenly the machine began responding in ways Elena had never seen before. "We are not just strong and fast," the being's voice said in Elena's mind. "Many of us have mental abilities that these civilized species have forgotten how to understand." The security protocols melted away like ice in sunlight. Elena's files began uploading to news networks, government databases, and research institutions across the galaxy. But then alarms began blaring again, louder and more urgent than before. "Emergency Protocol 7 activated," announced Dr. Vextar's voice over the communication system. "Biological contamination detected. Beginning sterilization procedures in 3 minutes." Elena felt cold fear run down her spine. She had heard about Protocol 7 in her safety briefings. It was designed to stop the spread of dangerous organisms by flooding the entire facility with deadly radiation. "They're going to kill everyone in the building," Elena said. "All the students, all the researchers, everyone. To hide their crimes," the crystal being replied, its colors shifting to angry reds and oranges. Elena tried to cancel the sterilization protocol, but it required authorization codes she didn't have. The countdown continued. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That's when Kronos surprised everyone. He moved to Elena's side and began making complex sounds, not to the other creatures, but to Elena herself. "He's trying to tell you something," the crystal being translated. "He says, pack bonds are not broken by death, but by giving up. He says you are pack family now, and pack family protects all cubs." Elena stared at Kronos. "Cubs?" The wolfbird creature made excited chirping sounds from its perch on top of the servers. "The other students?" Elena realized. "He's talking about all the students in the building. He considers them cubs that need protection." 2 minutes. Elena understood what Kronos was asking her to do. It was dangerous, maybe impossible, but it was the only way to save everyone in the Institute. She turned back to the computer and began working on a different system, the facility's evacuation procedures. If she could trigger a general evacuation, the students might be able to reach the emergency shelters in time, but the system wouldn't respond to her commands. "I need higher clearance," Elena said desperately. The crystal being's colors shifted to determine blues and greens. "Then we will get it. 1 minute and 40 seconds. The creatures spread out through the communication center, each one focusing on a different computer terminal. Elena watched in amazement as they used their various abilities to override security systems, access restricted databases, and break through electronic barriers. They weren't just physically powerful. They were also incredibly intelligent, each species bringing different mental abilities that complemented the others perfectly. 1 minute. Elena finally broke through to the evacuation system. Warning messages began broadcasting throughout the Institute in dozens of languages, telling everyone to reach the emergency shelters immediately. But it wasn't enough time. 30 seconds. That's when Kronos did something that changed Elena's understanding of him forever. He moved to the facility's main power control and began systematically destroying it with his claws. But he wasn't attacking randomly. Elena could see that he was targeting specific components, shutting down power to the sterilization system while keeping life support and emergency systems running. He was sacrificing himself to save the others. The sterilization countdown stopped at 15 seconds, but alerts began flashing that the building's main structural supports were failing without power. The Institute was going to collapse. Elena grabbed her datapad with all the uploaded evidence and ran to Kronos. "We need to leave now." But Kronos didn't move. He was holding his position at the power controls, using his massive strength to keep crucial systems working while the building began to shake around them. "He won't abandon his post," the crystal being said. "It is against pack law to leave when cubs are still in danger." Elena felt tears in her eyes. "But you'll die." Kronos looked at her with his bright yellow eyes and made that soft rumbling sound she had learned meant he was happy. The other creatures began moving toward the exits, but they paused to touch Kronos gently with claws, tentacles, and crystal hands. Elena realized they were saying goodbye, but Elena refused to accept this. She ran back to the computer terminals and began working frantically. If Kronos wouldn't leave his post, then she would find another way to keep the building stable. "Help me," she called to the other beings. "There has to be another way." Together they worked to reroute power systems and activate backup structural supports. The crystal being used its abilities to directly interface with the computer systems. The octopus creature flowed through the machinery to make physical repairs. Even the smallest creatures contributed, using their unique skills to solve problems Elena couldn't handle alone. And slowly, impossibly, they stabilized the building. Kronos stepped back from the power controls, amazement in his yellow eyes. "Pack protects pack." The crystal being translated his rumbling words. "And Pack family found a way." Elena hugged Kronos' massive neck, not caring about his sharp spines or dangerous claws. "We're all getting out of here together." As they made their way toward the exit, Elena could see through the windows that news ships were already arriving. The evidence she had uploaded was spreading across the galaxy, and the whole universe was learning the truth about the Zerion Institute. Dr. Vextar and the other researchers would face justice for what they had done. The imprisoned beings would be recognized as the intelligent people they had always been, and humans would be accepted as more than just primitive creatures who felt too much. Elena and Kronos emerged from the Institute together, along with their new family of freed beings. The morning sun felt warm on Elena's face as reporters from a dozen species surrounded them. "Are you the human who exposed this conspiracy?" asked a journalist with blue skin and forearms. Elena looked at Kronos, who made that happy rumbling sound and gently nudged her forward with his massive head. "We exposed it together," Elena said firmly. "All of us. Because real intelligence isn't about technology or logic. It's about recognizing the worth in others and protecting those who can't protect themselves." Months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of a ship heading toward Vorthak Prime. The Galactic Council had officially recognized the beings from the Institute as sapient species and granted them full rights. The Xerion Institute had been shut down, and new laws protected intelligent creatures regardless of their technological level. Elena was going to Vorthak Prime not as a researcher, but as a member of Kronos' pack family. She would learn their ways, and they would learn from her. Together they would explore the galaxy and help other species that needed protection. Behind her, Kronos approached with quiet footsteps. He had grown even larger since his freedom, his fur thick and healthy, his spines gleaming in the starlight. "Ready for home?" Elena asked him. Kronos made that familiar rumbling sound and touched her shoulder gently with one massive paw.